Everybody loves the idea of a Roth conversion, that is, until the tax bill comes due. And in today's video, I'll be revealing the most dangerous trap that most people often overlook when it comes to Roth conversions that ends up eroding, wiping out wealth for countless retirees. And while this supposed smart strategy often backfires in really expensive and big ways. Now, don't get me wrong, as a certified financial planner specializing in working with retirees, I love Roth conversions. That is, when it's done right, when it's appropriate, when it fits into the plan, they could be a powerful tax-saving and long-term wealth-building tool. But I've also been on the cleanup crew for far too many new clients who come to me trying to have done it themselves poorly, or worse, they just got flat-out bad advice by somebody else, and they end up paying the taxes and the price. And nothing bothers me more than seeing people pay unnecessary taxes and penalties because of a poorly timed Roth conversion. So that's why I'm making this video. That's what we're going to dive into today. How to expose the cash trap that I often see so many people get wrong when it comes to Roth conversions. How to avoid wiping out your retirement wealth. We'll dive into that. Let's get started. What is a Roth conversion? I get a lot of questions on this. At its core, a Roth conversion is when you intentionally decide to pay taxes today up front in order to save money on taxes in the future. And you do this by taking a portion or all of your pre-tax IRA or 401k and moving it, converting it into a Roth IRA. Think of it this way. It's like crossing a bridge and paying a toll to cross that bridge. It's the taxes that we pay to get from pre-tax land to Roth tax-free land. And the nice thing is, once your money is over in the Roth IRA, it grows tax-free forever. That's right. There's no longer any taxes on distributions. You're not subject to required minimum distributions, which is a beautiful thing. You're in control. And your kids or heirs, when they receive that money, it's also tax-free to them. And what we're going to look at is there's situations where this is a really good idea, and then there's other times where it maybe doesn't make as much sense because of the taxes that we have to pay. So let's dive into it. Now, a Roth conversion can be a really good move under these four circumstances. The first one is when you expect to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. I refer to this, and I've made videos on it, which I'll link to in the show notes, as the golden window of retirement. That's when you retire, but you haven't yet started Social Security benefits. And during this time, your income and your tax bracket has come considerably lower, which could be a ripe opportunity to do a Roth conversion at a much lower tax bracket. The second one is that you have time on your side. Repeat after me. Time is my biggest ally, right? Because remember, we're going to have to go into the hole. We're going to have to go into the red to pay for the taxes on the Roth conversion. We're going to get into some of the mistakes that I see on how people pay taxes in just a moment. But when we're paying the taxes, that money otherwise could have been used to grow and compound in the market. And so we need to have time on our side to make up for that lost money that otherwise could have been invested. So we have to have time on our side and understand how our numbers work. Number three is we want to lower our future required minimum distribution. Maybe you have a giant tax bomb coming in your 70s. That's right. When required minimum distributions kick in, depending on when you were born, somewhere between 72 and 75, you're going to be required to take money out of your IRA or 401k pre-tax assets. And when that comes, Uncle Sam is going to say, doesn't matter whether or not you need the money, it's time to pay the taxes. And so another great reason people consider a Roth conversion is they can systematically start shaving off portions from their required minimum distribution and lower their overall tax liability later on down the road. And number four is if we want to leave money to our kids or our heirs tax-free. This is a personal conviction. I have a lot of clients that say, hey, when my kids inherit this money, they're going to be at the top of their own tax bracket. They're going to be in their 40s, 50s. They may not need that money, and I don't want to make them have to pay taxes on that. So I'm going to do that for them today. Again, personal choice. But again, any of these four situations, that could be a golden opportunity for a Roth conversion. This is key. We have to understand, does a Roth conversion make sense? We need to run the numbers. That means professional modeling, factoring things like taxes, potential penalties, or IRMA surcharges, which we'll dive into in just a minute, and then cross-compare to see if the long-term savings and benefits is actually there. Because as great as a Roth conversion is, it doesn't always make sense. And I want to walk through four scenarios where it's not the best use of your cash. Now, the first one, maybe you have a small IRA balance. That's okay. Whether you've been saving in a brokerage account, a Roth, or you have a pension, if you have a small IRA or 401k, that also means you're going to have a small and manageable required minimum distribution, which means you don't have to optimize your retirement plan. You don't need to do a Roth conversion if this required minimum distribution in the future is going to not push you into a new tax bracket. So you don't have to do it just because everyone's telling you to do it. The second one is that maybe you're getting started a little late. You're retiring in your 60s and 70s, which is the ideal time to retire. But when we run the numbers with your Roth conversions, you see with the taxes you're having to pay, you're never going to be able to climb out of that hole, and you're just better off leaving it in a 401k or pre-tax IRA and paying the tax on the distribution. So if the math doesn't make sense, the math doesn't math, you don't have enough time to make up from the upfront tax bill. That's okay, but we need to understand that ahead of time, because it may not be until 20 years later where we finally break even from all those taxes we paid up front. And the third one is if you're already giving to charities, nonprofits, whatever it is, chances are you can continue to do that in your retirement account through qualified charitable distributions. Because by doing this, it not only counts towards your required minimum distribution, but it also lowers your taxable income. And so that's the name of the game with a Roth conversion, is to lower your taxable income, your tax liability down the road. And if you're already taking your required minimum distribution, which is what we're trying to avoid by doing the Roth conversion and getting hit on taxes, if you're planning to give it to charity anyway, Roth conversion doesn't make sense for you. And the last one here, and this is where we're going to spend a majority of the time in our video today, is if we don't have the cash to do the Roth conversion. Maybe it's the Roth conversion works on paper or in theory, but they forget how they're going to pay for it. So what I want to do is dive into a quick illustration to show you the math behind a Roth conversion and what it looks like for folks, Frank and Janet, who are retired before age 65, and their only source of income that they have right now as they retired early before Social Security are distributions from their taxable brokerage account. They're doing a good job. But we could see how one mistake in taking the money to pay for a Roth conversion from an IRA rather than from cash or brokerage account could cost them significantly more in taxes. So let's go ahead and dive into this example. So they have a high yield savings account that they get some taxable interest from. They have municipal bonds that they get tax exempt interest from. They have their dividends, both qualified and non, and then their distributions that I mentioned earlier, $75,000 that they're taking out. Some of that has short and long-term capital gains, with the majority of it being long-term. Now, when we back out their standard deduction, their taxable income is $31,000. They're not paying anything in taxes. And so they're in the 10% marginal tax bracket, but there's nothing there that they have to pay taxes on, which is a really nice thing. They have no ordinary income, or very little. And so when we look at a $100,000 Roth conversion, one of the things we want to look at is what's called bracket filling. How much room do we have within the 10 or 12% tax bracket before we move to the next bracket, which would be 22 or 24? And secondly, where are we going to pay for those taxes? Is it going to be from an IRA or from cash, hopefully that they have saved up and accumulated? So let's look at this. If we were to do this wrong, we do the same $100,000 Roth conversion compared to doing it right in the other column here. But the one key difference, where you take the distribution to pay for the taxes. Now we could see on a $100,000 Roth conversion, give or take, let me move my screen here. If we do it correctly and pay for it from our cash, or even from a very high basis where we don't have a lot of capital gains from our brokerage account, though I advise against that because we don't want to erode our future purchasing power and assets. We want to let those grow, right? So if we use our cash, we can see here, after the Roth conversion, they're still in the 12% tax bracket, which is really nice. And it's going to cost them about $15,000, almost $16,000 on the federal side, all in to do that Roth conversion. Now, if we have to take a distribution from the IRA to pay for that Roth conversion, well, we can see it's going to cost them about $5,000 more. See here, $19,000. We don't want that. And that also pushes them into the 22% tax bracket. That doesn't mean the entire Roth conversion is taxed at 22%, but now their money isn't going us further because we've just crept into the next tax bracket. So when we look at, for Frank and Janet, doing the Roth conversion of $100,000 and paying from it from cash, we can see their tax return looks really nice. They're in the 12% tax bracket. Their taxable income is $131,000. But the nice thing on this is because some of this is long-term capital gains and qualified dividends, their marginal taxes is only $92,000, which gets them right under the 12% tax bracket. They're in the 12%. Anything above it, they have a little room to go here, about $4,000 before they go into the 22% tax bracket. And at some point when they have to look at Medicare, we'll go ahead and toggle that on real quick here. So we'll go to manage sections. We'll look at Medicare premiums, and we can see they've done a really good job also staying beneath that threshold. In the case of Frank and Janet, we can see why having a game plan is so important. First and foremost, we have to run those models to see, does a Roth conversion actually make sense? Next, we want to see, how are we going to pay for this? What is it going to cost us, both from a federal and a state tax perspective? And then, do we have the money to be able to pay for this? And we could see with Frank and Janet, paying from cash as opposed to an IRA asset means they have more money left over to save and invest. It costs them less overall in taxes. It keeps them in the 12% tax bracket. And that is honestly one of the biggest things that gets overlooked, is if we're having to use IRA assets to pay for this Roth conversion, not only is it costing us more in taxes, but that's lost growth when we think about that money that otherwise could have been used to stay invested. And when we look at that over 20 and 30 years of compounded growth, that's not just a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 mistake. That compounds over that amount of time to hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost growth and getting nothing in return, all for the sake of potential tax saving. And so we know the damage doesn't also stop there. Just like I showed on the screen, doing a Roth conversion incorrectly or pulling money from the wrong account to do your Roth conversion can cost you more in taxes, but it could also spike your Medicare IRMA surcharges if you're over 65. It could impact how much you're paying for health insurance on the ACA open market care place before you get to 65, or it could lead to more quarterly and estimated tax payments. So these are all reasons you need to know exactly where your income will land before you hit the go button on the Roth conversion. How do you avoid this trap? Let's not make the same mistakes that we've seen in these examples. And it starts with knowing our numbers. We got to figure out, how much are we going to convert? How big of a conversion are we going to do up to a certain tax bracket? And what is that going to cost us both on the federal and on the state side? And once we've arrived at those numbers, this is where we should be setting 2 to 3 times our estimated tax bill away on top of our emergency fund. Go ahead and open a separate high yield savings account, titled it Future Roth Conversions, set it away. That way we can comfortably cover the tax bill without ever having to dip into our investments, because we want to leave our investments alone. We want to allow them to keep growing. And so get our emergency fund, start to save. And then the one thing that I think a lot of people forget is that we're going to want to have a well-funded brokerage account, not to fund the Roth conversion, but to fund our lifestyle while we're thinking or considering about doing Roth conversions. Because in the case of Frank and Janet, one thing that we saw during that golden window where they're waiting and delaying Social Security, they have no income coming in, the importance of living off of capital gains and basis is it keeps our income intentionally low, which helps Medicare and IRMA down the road. It helps qualify for premium tax credits, and it helps us be able to have a larger bridge to be able to do larger Roth conversions. And so now that you know these traps that we've talked about in this video, and more importantly, how to avoid them to protect your long-term retirement wealth from any destruction, if you need help figuring out whether or not a Roth conversion actually makes sense for you and how to do that, how to implement it without falling into any of these traps, what I want you to do is click on the link in the description below. I'll send you a personalized Loom video outlining you exactly how to optimize your retirement plan. Thanks so much for watching our video. I'll see you in the next one.